afternoon and welcome to the 30th event in our Thought Leadership series at Western Sydney University. We are thrilled to have you join us as we continue to explore the astounding work of Western researchers, showcasing how their innovations and insights are shaping a better future. We are delighted to welcome our speaker today, Associate Professor Lynde Tan, to talk about the magic of augmented reality, enhancing young children's literacy in the digital world. Associate Professor Tan is a multi-award winning educator and researcher in digital literacies, language education, and multimodal literacies at Western Sydney University. Their work explores how emerging technologies can be integrated into educational practices to enrich learning experiences. Associate Professor Tan's international reputation is reflected in their widely cited publications and numerous invitations to speak at conferences both in Australia and abroad. Please join us in welcoming Associate Professor Lynde Tan for this presentation. Over to you, Lynde.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Better, for that lovely introduction. And again, before I begin, I too would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking from the Darug land, and I pay respect to elders and present, as well as to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians joining the talk online or in person here. And thank you, Library Services, for inviting me to speak. Okay. All right. So this research is based on a study, or rather this talk is based on a research study that I completed in 2022. And it was funded by the Primary English Teaching Association, or PETA for short. Now, PETA is one of our largest professional learning providers for Australian teachers here. I'm really honored to be funded by them. As you can see on this slide, that arising from this research was a few academic publications, webinars, keynotes, particularly overseas international keynotes, as well as professional articles for practitioners. And if there's anything shown here is of interest to you, please reach out to me after the talk. Of course, I'll be happy to share more with you at my work. Now, I'm really fortunate. As you can see, we all remember what happened sometime between 2019 and 2022. I don't have to remind you that. For this project, my research team and I worked with about 8 teachers, including school teachers from Tasmania. But because of COVID-19, things got a little bit complicated. And in the end, for classroom observations, we were only able to observe actual implementation of AR from kindergarten to year 4. So year 4 was around 9 years old in Australia context. But I must say that our persistence was really rewarding. In the end, in 2021, I was awarded the Research Impact Competition at Western. I think I got a People's Prize. And then in 2022, the book Between Worlds here, that's a book published by PETA. It was nominated for Educational Publishing Awards Australia 2 to 3 months after its release in 2022. So it was really an honor. As you can imagine, it's really hard introducing emerging technology in our local context and then compounded by COVID-19. But as you know, the persistent one always survives. So why this topic? Now, you and I know children are naturally imaginative. They can make dinosaurs, their toy dinosaurs, come alive on the kitchen table. They can travel to outer space right where they are in the bedroom without leaving the planet Earth. So I thought, if I can bring that magic, quote and unquote, into the everyday formal learning, then, maybe I can find a group of teachers who are bold enough and who can share the vision with me and just get things started. So I was really fortunate to have teachers working with me also as co-researchers, And that means that we are designing lesson ideas together. We're evaluating at least 18 AR apps together. We come up with evaluation criteria together and so forth. Okay. And that was the plan. So what is augmented reality, or AR for short? Now, just by the show of hands, and those of you who are online, you can raise your virtual hands, okay? How many of you have heard of or even played with Pokemon Go? Many honest people here. Now, if you have played with it or heard about it, you have already encountered one of the most famous example of AR. Now, Pokemon Go will allow you to see digital creatures popping up on the real streets, even on the plane, yeah, through your mobile devices. So normally it's through an iPad or through a phone. So AR is that kind of technology. It lies on a continuum between the real world, like now in person, as well as the completely immersive virtual world, like in a game kind of setting. So AR kind of sits in between because it allows us to combine the real and the virtual content together. And the virtual content is interactive in real time, and oftentimes, if not all, is presented in the three-dimensional format. Okay? So I am going to show you an example using one of the AR apps called Wonderscope. Now, I love Wonderscope. It has a collection of interactive narratives. And I forgot to mention that, the research team and I only use free viewer-based AR apps, which means the children do not need to wear any head-mounted devices. Partly because we don't have money. Let's just be honest. Most of my money goes to my research associates. They are rich, not me. And the other reason, cyber sickness. When the students are in a completely virtual environment, as in like virtual environment, okay, they might lose their sense of balance. And the technical term is cyber sickness. So safety is a big concern. So we thought AR, lying in between that reality and virtual reality continuum, is sort of safe because the students are able to still have a good sense of the immediate physical environment, and at the same time, they can navigate that virtual environment. And that is the reason why I called the book Between Worlds, kind of in between, yeah, between the real and the virtual worlds. Now, so in this story, so this virtual character here is called Cleo. Now, Cleo is cuter than Labubu, yeah? I think so. Cleo wants to be a star. It is a tiny speck of stardust. So in the story, actually, I should let you watch first. There will be problems, just like in any narrative, and watch how student is involved when they interact with Cleo, okay? And I'll explain a little bit more.
Hi, my name's Cleo. I want to be a star, a gorgeous star that illuminates the universe with beauty.
I can help you.
Really? You'd help me? Thank you. Come on, follow me through this portal. Let's go. We need to find a red giant. Grab my hand and I'll take us.
Cleo, welcome.
Up here? Atmosphere? Wow, a real-life human! You're so tall!
Can you imagine why children love it, yeah? I can see smiling faces here, so you love it too. Now, you can see that the interaction was real-time. It was 3D, rather immersive for this particular app. And in this case, the augmented reality experience was triggered using voice input. The student has to speak. and then Cleo will pop up and speak to the students. The students cannot sit down like you. They have to move around. And as I mentioned, most of the time, the AR experience is accessed using a mobile device. And in school, we use the iPad. Now, how is this experience different from reading a book like this? Now, my approach in working with teachers has always been consistent. I don't impose. I like to augment classroom practices. So I don't just use augmented reality or any emerging technologies just because they're new. So in this case, and also because of the limitation of time, I can only draw on the year 2 examples and data. So in that year 2 classroom, the teachers have a close study of text because in Australian curriculum, we integrate language, literacy, and literature. So they were reading 2 books. Chris Hadfield, he's an astronaut, a real astronaut. So he wrote that book called The Darkest Dark. Now, just take that book, for example, and you can see the image there and that excerpt from the particular page. Astronauts, real life astronauts. So the author got to tell the students, I'm not making this up. There are people called astronauts, not just shown on Disney movie, but they are paid to be astronauts. They're real, okay? And on the actual far away moon, now we see the moon almost every day, okay? But we can't touch the moon. So there's a form of detachment in that printed words. They. Now you are reading this text from a third person perspective, okay? Wearing puffy white suits, okay, or like us in winter, and jumping for joy. There's some abstract imagery coming up. Jumping so high because there was so much less gravity, again, there. So there is a sense of detachment, abstract imagery, and a lack of a connection between the text and the students' everyday realities. Now, how many of you have gone to the moon? Oh, you lucky people, you all have gone. So I'm the only one left. So of course you can see that, there is a disconnect. There are some people who have seen what astronauts do, who they are from documentaries, from the movies, but most of us lack that deep knowledge because we have not been to the moon. We have not interacted with an astronaut and so forth. And we all know from literacy research, if you have limited prior knowledge, that is a stumbling block in text comprehension. So what do we do? So we went high and low, searching for AR apps that depict similar context like the book here. And we found this AR app called the AR Moon. Now you can see, so on the right, that is one page taken from The Darkest Dark. You can see the context is quite similar to the screenshots, okay, that I presented on the left of my slide. Now, what is the difference? First of all, in AR experience, students are positioned as a character in the interactive narrative. Now, that makes a whole world of difference, okay? So now, comprehension is scaffolded through that multisensory and the multimodal engagement. So learning about an unfamiliar word is no longer just saying that word, hearing what the definition is, but they themselves experiencing the meaning of the word in context through a lot of bodily actions and movements. That's why it's multi-sensory. So here in the book, you see an astronaut, but in the AR experience, you become one of the virtual astronauts, greeted by a virtual astronaut. So they have to use the iPad, walk towards that portal, and then the rocket door open. You go through it. That means you move forward, and then the rocket launched off and take them to the moon. You can imagine the noise level. That will be like, very exciting. Now, here is an example of an unknown word called rover. So the students were year 2, 6 to 7 years old. Oh, I didn't mention that there is a high population of EALD students. So in Australia, it means English as an additional language or dialect. So the home language is not English, okay? So we got a high population of EALD students in that class. So how do they learn the meaning of rover? First of all, visual cues. There was an image of a rover, and there are visual cues for them to move forward towards that vehicle. And then they will start to drive the rover through touch. So you can see turn left, turn right, go forward, as though they are driving the rover. So there's a concrete sensory experience now for them to understand rover, the meaning of rover. And of course, there's a map. Just like us driving, right? There's a map, and then you've got all your buttons, your gears, your wheel, etc. So there is a sense of realism, a sense of being there, a sense of being teleported. Now that close that detachment that we talked about just now when they're interacting with a print. So this is different. They are being there. The connection between the virtual content, the context, the action, and the bodily movement is what we call action-based comprehension, which is why many AR research shows that students have high vocabulary retention when they learn language through AR. And this is just one example. And I must say, my study is purely qualitative. If I got further funding, if the funders are there, I'm here. I'm willing to do a quantitative study to see the correlation. So now I was a bit sarcastic. I deliberately used the word magic in my title. Why? Because first of all, as you can see from Cleo, it's magical, right? Everyone is smiling and be like, wow. Now, that kind of wow moment didn't happen like magic in reality. When we think of magic, we think about a magic wand. It's instant, it's effortless, it's immediate. In reality, it's not like that. The teachers and I, the whole research team, are constantly documenting, watching, make sure everyone is okay, everyone is safe, the curriculum is delivered, the principal is watching. So eyes on us. And we constantly engage in reflection to see what worked well and what did not work well. And by the end of the research, we came up with these 4 interconnected components that help the AR experience to be meaningful and engaging for our students. Now, they are not linear, but just 4 interconnected aspects. And this is the pedagogical framework that got teachers really excited, are presented in different webinars, as well as talk about it in the book. So I'll walk you through. Onboarding experience is a must. It simply means the first time you are engaging with a new app, okay? It might be AR, it might not. And that is important because the students as well as the teachers need to be familiar with what the AR app can and can't do. Without that onboarding experience, you can end up in a little funny situation like this image that I'm showing on the right. Now, this is the first time a year 2 student is using the AR app called AR Moon. Now, the student is still navigating the in-between world. She was driving the rover and going into the bush. And the teacher said, don't go too far. Okay, what did you find? So from the teacher view, the student was taking an iPad, walking into the bush. But when you are looking from the student perspective, it was those images that I showed to you, the map, the menu for them to turn left, turn right, move forward, move backwards. That was the view. Okay, so this student haven't got a hang of that in-between space yet. Now, the other amusing one was the kindy class. Now, I can't show you the actual photos because of the ethics consideration, but I recreate the photograph using GPT-5. And it reminds me of my own children when they were a toddler and watching the TV for the first time. So they will hold the mobile device and they will wave their hand. They will look behind. It's like, is this real? Because the real and the virtual world are blended. And sometimes they'll ask their friend, okay, hold this. And then they walk behind and say, can you see me? So this is really amusing. Now, the teachers are equally amusing. I hope they're not here, but they don't mind me saying that. It was the first time using an AR app, and they were walking towards the wall because they're walking through a portal. And then I was saying the same thing, come back. That reminds me of Harry Potter walking through that 9 3/4 wall. So that was onboarding experience. And if this is not, or if adequate time is not spent in this onboarding experience, really the actual content and conceptual learning cannot take place. Okay? So I would say don't jump, give enough time for purposeful play. Now, embodiment is a big word. And as I mentioned, because of all this multisensory and multimodal engagement, there is a sense of being there, a sense of realism, a sense of being teleported to an imaginative world. Now, embodiment, simply put, okay, it is learning through the body. Now, I was told that a great mix of people here. They're educators, they're parents, they're librarians. My PhD students are all here, and also just plenty of curious minds here. So I try to say in very simplistic words, okay? Again, if you look at Cleo and draw on your own Pokemon experience, for those of you who played with it, there's a lot of sensory motor engagement. Now, it all depends on how sophisticated your AR app is. I won't go into the other kind of embodiment. Sometimes it lands you into a totally virtual world. Now, with the iPad, okay, the students explore the augmented world through the iPad. And the AR apps has many touch features for them to engage with those contents. So the AR app becomes like an extension of their body. They look into the world, they explore the world through that mobile device, through the AR app. So as I mentioned, they will be looking up, looking down, moving around. They will be listening, touching. And that touch, we call that intra-text interactivity. It's not like our normal iPad. You see across, you close it. Of course, there are features like that. But most of the time, one touch, be it swiping, dragging, pinching, circular moves, or tapping, something will happen in the interactive narrative. And it's unpredictable. Okay? And that is the fun bit. That's the magical moment. And because a lot of virtual content is presented in 3D dimension, we can interact with the virtual content in several ways. Selecting the virtual content, position it well, rotate it and scale it smaller, bigger for closer examination. Now, my research team and I also found a 3-point continuum for the embodied context. In the first context, you can have a virtual content sort of laid over into the real context, and it's not that surprising because you kind of can imagine that virtual context belonging to that real world. So for example, we found a Jack and the Beanstalk. Now, beanstalk is a plant, right? And that was taken from, I think it's Figment. I can't remember right now. It's another AR app, Figment. And the students plant it in the school garden. So garden, plants, legitimate relationship. Not surprising. And then in the library, we always had this white screen getting ready to watch a movie for film study, etc. And we thought, hey, what a wasted space. And Figment allows us to create a portal. So if the teacher is reading about the beach, okay, they can create a portal, put it on the white screen, and the students kind of enter the portal by moving close to the white screen, and it made them feel like they step into the beach. Okay, so the school could be in Western Sydney, but they're in Bondi Beach. So how wonderful. So that kind is an example of virtual context recontextualized into a real context. Now, because text comprehension was really something that we were trying to target, right? We also have app called Metaverse, not a high-end Metaverse, an authoring AR app called Metaverse, and the teachers can create QR code and develop a virtual character that pop up. So here, just at certain point of when we're reading a book, we kind of have a stop tape and ask the student, okay, there's a QR code put into that book for you. Use the iPad, scan the QR code, you will have a visitor. And we try to create the same character from the narrative to interact with the students. So it's sort of like reading comprehension without them knowing. Okay? The last one is the example where the virtual context is totally disconnected from the everyday experiences. Bring the Great Wall of China to this hall. Okay? Bring the moon, the solar system, into the classroom. That's not what we normally see when you show up for work or for school. So that is that kind of situation students tend to like because it has a wow factor. Now, I must stress the third phase, talking to learn, is really important. Every lesson where we use AR, we have a whole class plenary talk. Why? You and I know that a lot of things that we learn from games is highly entertaining. Unless the teachers play a part in transforming the tacit experience to explicit experience, students get lost in the entertainment without them really finding out what have they learned. So talking to learn is that opportunity we grab and teach both students and teachers to strengthen their classroom talk. For the teachers out there, we're introducing meta-language, which is a language about language. There's language to describe and interpret this audio mode, the visual mode, the gestural mode, the linguistic mode, the spatial mode, and so forth. And the interplay of all these modes, how did they interact to mediate our perception? So we always end the class with such talk. Okay? So for example, in the year 2 class, we thought, hey, we should discuss how the vastness of space is constructed using the range of modalities. So for example, when you hear the rocket launched off, it'll be loud to soft, right? Because as things travel away from us, it gets softer and softer and softer. Yes? And also they hear faint and muffled voice from the astronauts trying to communicate with them. Now, why is it faint? Why is it muffled? And most of the time, other than technology failure, is because they're far away, right? And the visual mode, when you look at the digital map, do you know how to read a digital map? Now, reading your GPS needs some visual literacy, isn't it? And of course, the gestural mode, as we mentioned, what did you do? What happened when you touch that particular button, etc.? And linguistic mode, there is a lot of verbal instructions given and also written text instructions. So they still have that so-called traditional literacy. And the spatial mode was really new for both teachers and students. And that was the unit of work that made things so easy to understand. So when the students, if you remember that page from The Darkest Dark, it was all dark, right? So when the students were on the moon, we get them to look visually at the darkness. Now, darkness, what does it suggest? Indefinite space. Was the moon crowded? Of course not. Now, who do you expect to see there? Why these people? What do they have there? What was the purpose? So in other words, short of telling them that, we were teaching the students social construction of space. So without naming all these big words, but the teachers know. So we're just giving the students those guiding questions and drawing their attention to meta-semiotic awareness. How do we do things with words, with images, with sound? What types of sound? How many types are there, etc. Now, the last phase is very important to us because we do not like the idea of positioning students as consumer of information or text, but we want them to be text producer. Now, if you remember, I started this talk by saying I'm not that kind that impose on current practices. Now, I have a chat, many long chats with the teachers, and print-based literacy is still important. There's still a place for printed books. There's still a place for using pencil, draw, and write. Now, what you see here is a whole class joint construction. Teachers are involved. So we took the students to go around the school premises and said, hey, if you are a text producer and you have that autonomy, maybe we didn't use these big words, you have the freedom, you have that power to reimagine this space, the school spaces, what would you do? What would that space become? So the students, there's a lot of brainstorming, okay, written, writing as well, speaking as well. So we were actually very sneaky. We were developing lots of language skills without them knowing because they were thinking about the wow moment, the magical moments, the playful moment. So more importantly, as you can see, we use a range of modalities in the jointly constructed text. And again, in that talking to learn, we always have the decision making with the students. Now, what is your idea? How is this idea best represented? through drawings? Is it through writing? Is it through augmented reality experience? And then they have to create a voiceover. So they have to write the script first. They narrate that script. So there's a voiceover narration. And then they have to, the teachers, of course, have to help with a QR code. And then we all kind of bind it into a book, put it at the office counter. So, parents waiting for the teachers to show up, etc., can read and scan the QR code and have access to those augmented reality experiences as well. What else should I mention about this? Oh, so we use this app called Think, Thyng, and very shortly you'll have a look at how that looks like. Now, Think allows you to have 1 minute oral narration. So now I feel a little bit bad, but it was good learning. The students write like maybe sometimes 2 pages. That's 7 years old, EALD students. And then when they start reading it out, they realize it's too long for a 1 minute video. And then they have to summarize it, delete it, and then they have to read again and again and again so fluently. So they didn't know they were practicing reading aloud. They didn't know they were having practice in fluency, in oracy. So these kind of things happen in a very playful manner so that they can have the final product. And I want to like to show you this final product. So here is a new playground at the school, and a group of students were thinking, we can turn that playground into a zoo. And during recess, we can play with the animals. Hopefully the virtual tarantula won't bite. And invite other people to know more about animals. So listen to the students narrating.
The playground can be used for learning. There can be a cute animal farm. They can have shelter under the tower, and children can learn about how to care for the animals. A spider in the middle of the web to learn about their habitat.
That's cute, isn't it? So this is just one example of what they have done. Now, I just want to go back a little bit because sometimes things are interactive, may not be engaging. Some people are like, for the educators, we think about engagement very differently. Of course, there's physical engagement, there's behavioral engagement in terms of motivation, but what we want is the cognitive engagement, right? Which is why talking to learn is important. And I want to go back to the embodied modes that help make reading comprehension or text comprehension immediate, embodied, and also tacit to a certain extent. So my former RA, TJ, and I have written a paper to talk about user app interactivity. Now, AR apps need a flat surface and a bright room for it to work. So different AR apps have different ways of input. So for Clio, it's through voice input, and there's this little cute monster that asks you to keep going around till they can find a landing pad for it to land. So actually, it's guiding the student to find a suitable physical space to trigger the AR experience. Once it's triggered, that little labubu thing will come out clear and say, who are you? And then the AR starts. So this is just triggering AR experience. It is interactive, but not much conceptual learning, language learning, so forth. Of course, there's following instruction and things like that. Now, this one is BBC Civilization. We actually meant to implement that in year 5, year 6 in Tasmania, but as I told you, COVID was really nasty. It didn't take place, but the lessons were all designed, okay? So here, BBC Civilization, bring the museum to you. You will see a book icon. Click that or tap that, and then you got the text on the right, and then you read, just like, reading an encyclopedia entry. Finish reading, click or tap that cross, it closes. So kind of similar to some of the interface with iPad online reading. And then if you want an so-called an abridged version, but key points about that artifact, tap that torch, which is really a highlight. It tells you key things about this particular artifact. Now, you can take a photo, tap the camera icon, click, and then that screenshot is taken. And that's how I take the screenshot for this presentation. So if you think about it, actually the student is very much like an information receiver. It's very much like going to museum, and even that museum is becoming more and more interactive. You go to an artifact, you read what is on the wall. Sometimes there's a button, you hit the button, you hear some narration going on. You can go closer. Sometimes you can walk around the artifact. You can take a photo, far shot, close shot. So very similar to a museum visit. A higher level is what we call a manipulator. Just short of vocabulary, really. It simply means there are some features on the AR apps that allows you to take control of your learning or your reading paths. Although there are visual cues, or what we call vectors in social semiotic terms, that kind of impose a certain reading path. So for example, on the left, AR Moon actually have 5 stages. We only unlock stage 1 and stage 2 because they are free. And you can see the double coding, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in our everyday reading experiences, you follow the order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the top-down layout kind of guide you to explore the lunar moonscape in that manner. But seriously, the students don't have to start like that. They can go to 4, and then they go to 1, and they go to 2, etc. Same thing for BBC Civilization. You choose what country, what themes, what artifacts. You can see the arrows, so you can swipe left, swipe right, tap what continent, etc. It's just like a museum. Should we start from the top floor and then we walk down? Could be easier. Or some people like the ground floor because we're already at the ground floor. And some museum, different floor have different exhibitions, so different themes. So very similar to real world situation. So we call it manipulator because it gives students choices for the starting point of that learning journey. And of course, there are 3D manipulation where, again, they can study those objects in depth and take a closer look. My favorite, as I mentioned, is the creator. Apps that allow students to have their authoring power that position them as creator. Now, this one is so cute. So this one is a little lounge area outside the principal's office and the counselor room. So you have this TV, right? And this little year 2 students were, and her friends in the group were saying, I think we need a dentist. So this is the door to the counselor room. What if that counselor room, Miss whatever, can't remember her name now, is a dental clinic. And this TV is actually the window. And then we can see what's happening in the dental clinic and when is our turn. So the teachers and I have to look for 3D, 360-degree video to create that portal. And I think we found it in Figment. And then they talk about it, etc. So we use a mixture of thing and I think it's from Figment as well, or other apps. Now, why is that important? One, authorship, ownership of learning, and I see a lot of potential for place-based pedagogies. Now, a location like this can mean nothing to you if you're unfamiliar or new to that environment. Now, for us, the literacy researchers, we call that space because we have not ascribed any meaning to this location. But when we guide the students in making sense of that space, remember I talked about social construction of space, then space becomes place. Because the students now have that meta-semiotic awareness to ascribe meanings. The social activities are meaning-making activities. Things found here are semiotic resources. People here are actors. So again, I didn't use all these bombastic words. It's just for the researchers. But we just say in very simple English for the students to understand. And they can bring in the language. There's room for translanguaging. There's room to bring in their cultural references and just how they see things from the students' voices. So I try to keep it easy to follow for all of you because the audience here is diverse. If you can't remember what I've mentioned, please remember these 3 key points. First of all, the negotiation of space is important for safety reasons as well as to make sure that key learning takes place. Okay, so students don't remember don't have to worry about the physical space and go into the augmented space to learn what you want them to learn. If you are that kind of teacher who want them to be quiet and sit down to access your AR app. I'm sorry, that is not the kind of situation. We have to actually look for open space. And for year 2 class, we went to a COLA, which is like an outdoor space but sheltered, so the students can move around without banging into each other. Okay, and remember the connection between the context, the overlay between the real and the virtual world, the bodily action, the movement, and the meaning of those words they hear is what gives us an action-based comprehension. Okay, and that's where we create new opportunities of reading, viewing, and creating text. Now, I never believe that technology can replace a teacher. Never, never. It's not in my teaching philosophy. I give credit to the teachers. Without the scaffold, I don't think the students have got out richly from those AR experiences. So teacher scaffold is still important. So I think that's all the time that I have left. Please keep in touch if you want to read up a little bit more, have a chat with me on how we can further collaborate to extend this study. I'm happy to do that. And as you can see, I've moved from AR to AI. Hopefully the next time I see you again is about AI. Oh, maybe AI and AR, who knows? And thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tan. I would now go to question time. If there's anyone in the room with a question, just raise your hand. I'll come around with the mic. We've also got a lot of questions coming in online from our online audience. So maybe, oh, we've got one over here. Okay.
Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. I really enjoyed that. So I have a question regarding the learning outcomes. I wonder if you had the opportunity to test the students' learning outcomes as well. And if you did, what are the results?
Oh, beat my memory. Now, we don't test students. Again, the teachers and I are pretty aligned in our teaching philosophy. We believe in ongoing assessment, not Naplan kind of tests. So do you remember the part where I talk about talking to learn? So the teachers actually ask a lot of questions to see whether the students understand. For example, the AR Moon or Clio, actually all of them, we have other AR apps that we use. The first thing we ask, of course, is how much they understand about the narrative. And the students can remember the sequence, the characters, the plot really well. And just judging from the teacher's comment that, hey, when I ask similar questions after reading a book, it's not as rich as what they have given me after going through similar multisensory experience. So that was one. And before we actually implement a unit of work, we start with a curriculum. As I mentioned, the teachers have accountability. We have very short time frame. We have EALD students. We have a lot to achieve with them. So we actually look at the Australian curriculum first and the outcomes, and I see which one we can tick off and how. So yes. So offhand, I can't give you the actual codes, Nessa. Now, Nessa is my PhD student. He asked me one question. I'm later on, after our meeting, I'm going to ask him 10 questions. Revenge. No, just joking. Yeah. So I can't remember the outcomes for sure, but yes, and in my publication and also online course for teachers, we have all that lined up. Yeah. But in a nutshell, there was speaking. As you can see, the oracy bit is pretty strong. Reading comprehension and storytelling, these are my best education benefits demonstrated by the students. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Any more in the room? Yes, I'll just come round.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Cameron McCall, I'm in social sciences. And you are talking about cognition and embodied cognition in the frame of teaching. As a geographer, we go out and do field trips. Oh. And for us, experiential learning and affect becomes a really important part of that. Have you gone in your papers and looked at the sort of the relationship in that sort of embodied cognition with that experiential learning side of things?
A little bit. There was a kindy case, and we were looking at the Gruffalo. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with that popular story. And students can be really scared. Now, this is kindy that we're talking about. And we, first of all, study the printed book first, okay? Why do you think when you are reading the story or the mouse in the story would be feeling scared as the mouse walked through the forest? So we study how scary monsters are represented. We study the visual environment, and the teachers and I use Metaverse to create a virtual forest, and then got the students to walk through the forest, pay attention again to how they feel, evoked by the sound they hear, okay, when they walk through the forest, when they see the animal size, etc., physical attributes like sharp teeth, things like that. So a little bit about the effect on what makes us scared when we read a book. And we use AR to do that because obviously the book can't do it, you know. Yeah, so a little bit about that. Yes.
It's fascinating. Anyone else? Yep.
Thanks, Lynde. That was really interesting. I'm Diana Jeffries from nursing.
Oh, nursing.
Yeah, I know a lot of these kind of digital technologies are being looked at within nursing, but I don't think we're anywhere near where you guys are with reading. But I just remember, I did a PhD in English, so I just remember the pain of learning comprehension as a child. But I also remember the joy of lying back on a Saturday afternoon and reading a book. And I just wonder, children go to bed. I remember my nephew reading his Lego catalogue when he was 3 as he went to sleep. We're not going to take that joy away, are
No.
we? I mean,
No.
And the other thing I was going to sort of talk about is I remember having a discussion with my sister about Peter Pan and how Disney had created a Peter Pan that we all knew. And you could no longer use your imagination to create Peter Pan. I was just wondering if you could...
I agree fully with you. No, I agree fully with you. In fact, as a mother, I stop my own children from using technology as far as I can. Reason being, schools, now this is generalization, okay? Schools tend to be more language dominant, and if students are too used to all this multi-sensory input, and you go to school, you're going to have a hard time engaging them, okay? So that is my hunch, my stance as a parent. If you remember what I mentioned just now, the teachers and I have a talk at their unit of work first. And I talked to them about the issues they encounter. So reading comprehension was one of them because of the high EALD students. We did not replace book, as you can see. We were talking about which part of the text needs further engagement. Now, what is it that the print can't do? Can we see and explore what AR has to offer? Now, there's no direct match. I remember spending my whole summer in 2019 just playing with a range of AR apps to see what's out there, what is suitable to fit into their goals, not the other way around. So yes, there is a place for books. I have a personal library at home because I just love flipping books and smell my books. Books are my assets. How sad.
Oh, as a librarian, I fully agree.
Yay! We got like-minded people here.
Like place and time, purpose for everything. Any more in the room? Okay, we'll jump to our online audience.
Oh, yes.
Lots of people.
Thanks, Lynde. A lot of thank yous, and I'm
thank you.
through all these questions and comments.
Oh, 75.
Quite a lot. So let me check. The first one from Professor K. Archer. A question for Professor Tan. Do you think AR has potential for use with special needs students? Could it be adapted, such as with captions for hearing impaired students?
You know, I don't want to pretend I'm not an expert in special education. And before the talk happened just now, is it Kelvin? Can't remember your name. One of the participants here and I were talking about special education. Now, originally, when I was conceptualizing this research, I was curious about that. I wanted to start with special education students. but I didn't have the opportunity for various reasons. I'm just thinking, maybe, don't quote me because I haven't done this research myself, there could be a transfer from that augmented space to real-world situations that can maybe help a little bit. Text engagement in terms of retention of attention, I think that might be all right. But again, I'm not sure what special needs you're talking about because it's so diverse, right? But attention retention could be one. That multimodal representation of meaning is something that I think accessibility can be enhanced because we all think in different ways. I'm actually quite bad with audio mode. I need to see and read. Okay. And I can imagine we have students with special needs need a certain range of modalities to better engage with text as well. So I see some promises there as well. And also not everybody, whether special needs or not, or without special needs, can represent using the linguistic mode. So for example, my EALD students, they have an idea. They can say it verbally, but they can't write it. So if we foreground ideas first, and allow maybe an alternative mode of representing knowledge, maybe through drawing first. Then we teach a scaffolding that can be communicated with other modes. And that's what happened in the kindy class. We have draw to learn, draw, talk, learn. Get them to draw first because at a young age, the central mode of meaning making is drawing. Then talk about it, and then we help them develop that into a grammatically correct sentence. So makes sense. And also authentic language learning because they see the objects that are legitimate, objects that, that tend to be found in a particular space. And then again, when we become storytellers, that helps them to make meaning in a way that use language very authentically.
Thanks, Lynde. And online participants are communicating and having a lot of conversations and sharing ideas and links. Okay.
Oh, wonderful. I would like to know that too.
Yeah, we will give it that.
Yeah, give it to me.
Now, Yuka Maruyama says they are deaf and believe about the potential of AI and language research. And let me go through next one. Chris is talking about just wondering, is there a key takeaway that demonstrates how these outcomes are different from experiential outside the classroom, play-based learning as seen in Montessori or Steiner models?
I've got early childhood experts here. Sorry, I'm just teasing my colleague here, Louis. Again, I'm more in primary education, so I don't want to pretend I'm an expert in early childhood. We are applying the same principles of experiential learning into augmented reality learning. So simply put, it's learning by doing. Okay, but as I said, it's not just being busy, having that physical engagement. Now, if you can imagine, we may not have that resources as well as support to bring a whole class of 25 students to the zoo. Okay, could be one situation like that. But if we can bring the zoo to the class, then logistically, that is no longer a problem. That's one. Two, I recently went to China to learn about the history of terracotta. It's so crowded. I can't even get near to read the artifact or take a photo. Now you can imagine a field trip to the zoo or to whatever field site. That could also happen. And then with the augmented reality, that 3D manipulation allows you to study an artifact closely. Again, I didn't have the image with you. In one class, we actually talk about subjective versus objective representation. And the student got to see how scientific facts are presented differently using different modalities. And I think you have a snippet of that in Clio. You can see like a cutaway of a planet, and the students can zoom in, turn around, pinch it to make it bigger, to study in depth on the structure of a planet. Now, we can't do that on site in a physical location. So these are some of the benefits that I can think of, or the differences. Yeah.
Thanks, Lynde. Eleni wanted to know about. I would be interested to find out how well the talking to learn feature works in practical terms with kids,
Yeah.
accents or speech impediments.
I'm not sure I can answer that, unfortunately, because I don't have that characteristics of the students in my classroom data or in my research. But for the mainstream students, it was okay because they were so excited. They have lots to offer because now they have concrete sensory experiences. They draw on their memories, their feelings, as well as observation of the augmented world to discuss about the text, to discuss about certain aspects that the teachers want them to think about. So for my mainstream students, it was all right. But unfortunately, I don't have the experience, the expertise to comment how that might work with our students who are hearing impact or have other special needs. So if we have special needs educators in the online mode, please help. Share your experience.
Sharon Griffith. Sharon is asking, is there an offline mode available for the software? If students are in the area without internet access, will they still be able to interact with the AR lesson?
No, unfortunately. Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, technology, I've done this kind as in tech technology for more than 20 years. And of late, I'm getting more and more sensitive about digital exclusion and equity issues. It's really sad that, students located in certain regions, areas, social, cultural background have not the same access as our students right here in the city. But there is a totally separate research. Yeah, but thanks for mentioning that. Sadly, the answer is no. And we need to do something about it.
Yeah, this is from Sarah. Thank you for your presentation. My concern is that more tech will displace imagination, not enhance it. Where is the evidence that more tech will support learning outcomes? Evidence shows retention and learning is most effective with pencil and paper. PISA scores are declining, reading rates are declining. The gamification of learning, especially literacy, is fragmenting the attention of our young people. How does a plan old book stack up for a 7-year-old child after they have been exposed to stimulus like this? What about acting out a story?
Now, I agree that there are dissenting views about technology use, and I, for one, never endorse this message that technology replaces everything and can solve the whole world issue. In fact, it can also create problems. And we can't speak in general. We really have to look at a particular case in point. What kind of technology? Did you use age-appropriate technology? Did you use a technology that's user-friendly? There's so many other factors that can impact the learning outcome. And again, I must repeat my message. I'm not saying throw away or burn away the books. No. So in our context, we were looking at gaps that books could not fill and how we can use that augmented reality experience to fill that gap so that students can think deeper and engage deeper with the text. So that was my aim. We were not able to solve the whole world problem, to be honest. And I do know of examples where technology, of course, can cause literacy to decline, especially AI, but we're not going to talk about it today. Okay, but just give you a sneak peek. If students do not know what to do, and my PhD students on AI are here, Nessa, you can take over the floor. If you are not careful and you outsource your learning to technology called AI, there is a cognitive debt. Soon, this mental black box is going to be empty. Okay, but there's a different time and space for that. But I do agree with you. If we are not careful, okay, and replace technology with the human soul or human education, human scaffold, things can go wrong.
You're right. And Trish, Viviana, and Yuka agrees with the similar things like it's not to be replaced, but should go with that.
I always tell my pre-service, I always tell my pre-service teachers, You know, I'm going to get you to play with technology. You need to play, purposeful play. If you don't play, you cannot make an informed decision. What works? What does not work? Right? And we're not saying that you must use technology all the time. But what I'm asking you is, with the experience, decide when do you use technology, for what purpose, for whom, and how. So that's always my summary point for that particular class on literacy and technology.
And just commenting that so they are talking more about how well Wonderscope, for example, hears kids' voices, especially if you need to read a particular sentence correctly to be able to continue the experience. So they are having comments.
That is where peer learning come into play. So they hear your friend mention the particular word, nebula. And those who do not know, in the context, oh, that's the word nebula. And of course, the teachers are still walking around. So that is a lot of contextual, experiential learning. Yeah, so that's how we pick up the connection between context, the word, the meaning, the action, as well as the movement. So it's very embodied.
And Sharon Griffith asks, what are your thoughts on the social media ban for under 16?
Oh,
And
gosh.
its impact on learning social media platforms like YouTube.
Again, the informal world is not quite the same as formal world. I must say that. The kind of informal literacies may not be able to be fully transferred into formal literacies, because the minute it is being the minute we apply informal to formal, then the formal literacy kind of take over. Okay, so the social media ban, I just think that students or the teenagers are clever enough to find a way out. You can't stop them. People have agency. Just like any parenting experience, I like to sit down and talk to these students, how they feel about it. Do they think that it's good or bad? In what way? And if the school, for example, ban mobile devices when they enter through the school gates, now what are the gains and losses? So I like to be a bit positive. There's the in and out of school world are always connected. And if you concentrate more on learning without technology, there are some gains. It's not all lost. But I do feel a little bit sad if I put my shoes into the 16-year-old shoes and all my photos are gone. And that is evocative objects. So we learn with our everyday objects. They have affects, they have motivation, they have interest tied to that device. It has to be handled in a gentle manner when they make that transition. A total cut-off never reads well with anybody. I just think that communication with the students needs to be handled gently. Yeah, that's my quick answer.
Thank you, Dr. Tan. I think that concludes all our online questions. Thank you so much for presenting today. If you could all join me in thanking Dr. Tan.
Thank you, everybody.